Good afternoon, everyone. My name is Victor Younger, Director of Diversity and Inclusion in the School of Hotel Administration. We started our Black History Month conversation series back on February the 11th, where Professor Douglas Miller spoke with three extraordinary culinary trailblazers. On February the 18th, Kate Dean Walsh of the School of Hotel Administration and SH students Gracelyn Goodrich and Raphael Batinga and Vikas Reddy moderated a wonderful conversation with NAACP Chief of Staff Iris Sims, class of '99. I'd like to thank my colleagues, students, eCornell, and the Centers and Institute for supporting our Black History Month series. Today, I have the pleasure to chat with three extraordinary leaders in the hospitality industry. We will hear their stories, their challenges, and success of BIPOC-owned businesses. BIPOC is Black, Indigenous, People of Color, owned businesses in the hospitality industry, and how the Black community drives revenue and innovation in the marketplace. Let me set the stage for today's conversations. I will provide a brief highlight of our guests, followed by three short videos that are intended to give you a deeper insight of who they are and what drives their passion for the work. Following the videos, we will dive right into some questions I prepared, but please add your questions to the conversation via the chat as well. So let's get started. Crystal V. Thomas, brand marketing professional extraordinaire, with over 10 years of international experience, driving brand innovation and operational excellence, creating global brand marketing campaigns, and executing branded events and partnerships. Crystal is taking Hyatt Hotels Corporation's lifestyle and luxury brands to new heights. Crystal is all about all things awesome. Warren Thompson, President and Chairman of Thompson's Hospitality Corporation, the largest minority-owned food service and facilities management company in the U.S. Founded in 1992, when Thompson's completed a leveraged buyout of 31 Bob's Big Boy restaurants from his previous employer, Marriott Corporation. Warren is transforming a $100,000 investment to a $1 billion company. Andy Ingram, native of Nassau, Bahamas. Andy launched Horizons Marketing Group International, Inc., his first company in Fort Lauderdale, Florida. He later founded the National Association of Black Hotel Owners, Operators, and Developers, affectionately known as NABHOOD, in 1999, where it was officially incorporated in 2001. When the Black community talks about ownership, real estate asset, and development in the hospitality industry, you know Andrew Ingram is somewhere in the deal. Let's roll the tape.
I am Crystal Venice Thomas, newly appointed Director of Lifestyle Brands. In my role, I'm on the brand team overseeing Thompson Hotels, Joie de Vivre, Hyatt Centric.
Why so many brands? Hyatt has 21 brands.
It's an ever-growing landscape within hospitality. I look at all the brands holistically, but when you really dive into it, there is really something for everyone. Even when you think of streaming and the world of content. So when Netflix first came out and then Hulu comes out, Disney announced their streaming platform, HBO, TV Plus, and I'm like, I'm not getting all of those, but guess what? I have all 8 because there's something within each of those platforms that fulfills me in a different way. When I look at that example, I can easily translate that to the world of hospitality, where within Hyatt, although we might have 21 brands, there really is something for everybody within those brands.
Where would you categorize an Andaz versus a Thompson?
Andaz, the definition in Hindi is personal style. So how do we, within the design, within the experiences, bring the location and destination to life in a whimsical way and with that Andaz twist? When we talk about Thompson, we use these words, refined edge, always on the edge of something, whether it's design, arts, fashion, entertainment, the design aesthetic, that mid-century modern design. One thing you'll find at any Thompson you go to around the country is the restaurant is going to be popping.
My name is Warren Thompson, Chairman and CEO of Thompson Hospitality. Thompson Hospitality today is a food service, facility management, and retail restaurant group operating in Reston, Virginia. Our primary customers are large corporations such as Microsoft, IBM, Prudential, universities such as Virginia State, primarily the historical black colleges where we're the largest player. We also service hospital centers such as Inova Healthcare here in Fairfax County. We also will continue to look at ways to expand in the area of technology. I'm a firm believer that our industry, as we know it, will continue to evolve at such a rapid rate. It is going to be driven by technology. What Amazon has done in terms of cashless or cashierless operations is only the tip of the iceberg. That is now going to spread into the convenience stores, quick serve, quick casual, where fewer and fewer people will engage with the customer. But technology will have to continue to be more friendly, more hospitable, because it basically is replacing that human touch. I saw Fairfax County 30 years ago as an innovative and an area that was filled with young, dynamic people at the time. People who were going to be on the cutting edge of technology, on the cutting edge of the diversity that is soon to be and has become the American melting pot. The diversity that we have in this county, the ethnic diversity, the economic diversity, all of those things that make America strong, I think Fairfax County represents the best of the best.
My name is Andy Ingram. I'm with the National Association of Black Hotel Owners, Operators, and Developers, better known as NABHOD, and I'm the President and CEO. NABHOD continues to grow. If you think about it, in 2001, we couldn't get 3 people at the table. Today we've got 450 attendees. One hotel in 2001 that was a brand, today just under 1,000 hotels. And our commitment is to continue the growth. This year's conference, more education, more awareness, more participation by the brand, and of course we had Chris Nassetta heading the lineup. Future of NABHOD is great, more owners. We've signed about 32, 33 MOUs with African American organizations to meet at our own hotels. So in another year, you'll be able to go to NABHOD website, book a hotel, and they'll be able to get 1 room or 1,000 rooms. It's a collaboration with our brand partners like Hilton and Marriott, and we're excited. But there's growth on the horizons, particularly as it comes to ownership, executive level employment, and most important, supply diversity. Already planning that next year is going to be better than this year. We've had a star lineup. We're going to talk about some of the deals that we did at this conference and show how quickly those deals can go from an idea to an actual hotel, breaking ground and coming out to be a fabulous asset.
All right. Well, first of all, I want to thank Crystal. Welcome back home, Crystal. I'd like to also thank Andy and Warren for being a part of this wonderful conversation today. We've been celebrating Black History Month, and certainly the finale and an opportunity to share your insight and hear your stories and your journey of what this industry is doing for you and what you're doing in terms of really engaging people in this industry. So with that being said, again, thank you for taking time out of your schedule to be a part of this conversation. So let's just jump right into some questions. And for this part, I'd like for everyone to answer. So my first question is, can you just tell us a little bit about your journey, and when did you discover that this hospitality industry, hospitality meaning real estate, brand development, meaning ownership, asset management, finance, when did you take that understanding that this was the industry for you? So Crystal, or who would like to jump in and just kick off the conversation?
Thanks for the intro, Victor. Happy to be here and so thrilled to be able to participate. Always great coming back
even virtually, to my alma mater. I'd say what's crazy is I was in the hotel school, but I spent a solid 2 years not thinking I would actually work in hospitality. So it might be the obvious answer that I discovered it at Cornell, which is actually true, but it was more towards the end of my tenure than it was at the beginning of it. And so my journey really started on campus. I thought I was just going to be a business major, whatever that meant. And it was either AIM, or whatever it's called now, Dyson, I think, or the hotel school. And then the hotel school didn't have a science requirement. So that was honestly the difference for me. But I just fell in love with the idea of traveling for work. Was crazy to me. I was an athlete at Cornell, and every weekend we were on the road going somewhere else. And once I started taking hotel school classes, I was just enamored by the nuances of the experiences and journeys that people created. I was like, people do this for a living? And so I was just fascinated by this world. And so as I started to expand, even postgraduate, it was like, this is the industry for me. I left for a little bit, but I found my way back. So that's me.
Awesome. Thank you.
Okay. Well, Victor, Crystal and Andy, it's great to be on the panel with all of you, and congratulations on your successes. I started thinking about this, I guess, when I was about 12 years old, growing up in the rural part of Virginia. I did not have a lot of exposure to business as a kid. My parents, my brother and I were sitting in a Shoney's one Friday night in Portsmouth, Virginia. And I said to my parents, I'd like to own one of these one day. So from that point on, I was focused on trying to understand how to run a business and how to get into the restaurant business. So I attended undergrad liberal arts education in Virginia at Hampton-Sydney College, argued my way directly into Darden, into the business school there, got them to waive the 2-year work requirement. And between first and second year, I was exposed to Marriott. Marriott had a fast track program where they would bring in about 10 to 12 MBAs each summer. At the end of the summer, they'd make an offer to one person to come back in their fast track program. So I got it for my class. It forced me to start as an assistant manager in a fast food restaurant right out of business school. I told them I would give them 7 years. I ended up giving them 9. At the conclusion of that, they gave me a loan for about $13.5 million, and that's how we started Thompson Hospitality.
Thank you, Warren. Andy.
Hey, Victor, thanks for having me. And first of all, congratulations for all you do to ensure that people of color have an opportunity now. You know, for me, growing up in the Bahamas and in Jamaica, it would be natural to be in the hospitality tourism business. But my parents, particularly my mother, forbid me from ever even thinking about it. And a logical reason I found that later was that she did not see people that looked like us in positions in the hotel industry. As you know, we're bottom heavy in the hotel industry and very light at the top. And so her issue was that, no, I don't care that your friends are in there, you're not going to do that. And so I figured out that I would go and become a business major like Crystal, but I knew that I wanted to be like my grandfather, who was an entrepreneur. He had a store in the Bahamas. Both my parents had businesses in the Bahamas, and I know I wanted to do something like that, but wasn't quite sure. And then obviously coming to the US to further my education and going to school, I started looking at the African-American travel market and essentially did some consulting work for Greater Fort Lauderdale, and always thought tourism was an interesting field to be in. And then decided, you know what? There's nobody that looks like us in this whole business that were at the top. And we had a couple of elected officials, Commissioner Sylvia Poitier, one of the first Black elected officials in Fort Lauderdale, and H.T. Smith, that tourism boycott in Miami. And so essentially, when we began to study the market, I didn't see any people that own anything. And I always tell people, but the problem is that once you leave the city or have that weekend is over, all you have is a great memory, but the money doesn't filter down. So I gathered a couple of friends, talked to them about investing in the ownership industry, and we flew down to Peachtree City in Atlanta, Georgia, and we talked about this organization. And people like Solomon Herbert from Black Meetings in Tourism, along with Don Rose, who became the first African-American in Chicago to own a hotel, a Days Inn, that's now a W Hotel. And when we looked around, there was one African-American owned hotel in the country in Memphis, Tennessee. And I said, we need to be there. And that's how we started.
Yeah, you know, that's the thing I have learned to love about NABHOOD is a commitment to pushing and understanding that the representation in the industry is not where it needs to be. It's not where it should be. And certainly there's an opportunity to expand it. So with that being said, I want to unpack a little bit more of this idea of, yes, you knew where you started from, but I'm sure there were individuals in your life that when you think about either a mentor or someone that you could talk to and really unpack this conversation, can anyone you mention or just talk a little bit about who was the person or individuals or group that you were drawn to that could really help you understand what this industry was all about and what it could really offer?
You know, there was a guy at the Asian American Hotel Owners called Mike Patel, and there was a guy named Mike Levin at Holiday Inn at that time. And when I began to look at this model, I remember somebody saying to me that Black people don't own hotels. I thought that was fairly odd. And so I reached out to Mike Patel, who was then the chairman of the Asian American Hotel Owners, and trying to understand their rationale for AHOA, and then being introduced to Mike Levin, then at Holiday Inn. I believe Mike was the president. And I said, Mike, I need some help. And both Mikes, for a matter of fact. And we had the National Coalition of Black Meeting Planners. And so I cajoled them into saying, why don't you guys consider meeting at Black-owned hotels? And so Mike Levin, no matter when I called, took my call. But there was a guy in there that Mike assigned to us called Brown Kessler. Brown Kessler was at our first meeting when we formed this group. And there was never a time that I ran into a problem that we couldn't call. So from an industry standpoint, he was there. And then there was a guy named Steve Joyce that worked at Marriott. That the first time we got a Marriott membership, Norm Jenkins, Ken Farron, Steve Joyce, and myself standing in front of the Marriott headquarters. So there's a lot of folks that had a common idea of inclusion. And for me, that was golden, just to be able to reach and talk to folks like that who were not only committed, not just in terms of what they said, but in terms of the work.
Yeah, awesome. Crystal, anything you'd like to add to that?
You know, I think a big spark of this conversation is really about the lack of representation and leadership of people of color. And to that end, I didn't really have anyone who looked like me I could talk to. So the folks I learned from were part of my organization and great mentors to me, but all non-people of color. And that's not to say, by the way, that you can't learn from people who don't look like you, but I didn't see the representation as I would hope to. And I think that inspired me more because I wanted to be, one of, and hopefully open the door to more. And so, there were a couple moments in the road where I actually considered going the DE&I route because I was like, oh, I'm really passionate about this. But then that would take me away from being the only one in the room in this brand marketing, brand management room that we often don't have a pathway towards. So some of the people, I just started to kind of connect myself to the former CMO of Starwood became a great mentor to me, Phil Nicoviti. For some reason, he opened his door to the little coordinator who sat, a couple desks down and just let me pick his brain. I became a sponge. My former global brand leader, Ava Ziegler, who looked after the luxury and lifestyle brands. I worked a lot on W Hotels and Le Méridien, and she really took me on her wing, and we're close friends now. And I was just really sure to attach myself to the folks I thought were changing the game and doing things differently, being creative. And they both happen to be European, which I think there's something to say about that too, the international global view that folks might have, where they honestly don't have a huge grasp on some of the struggles we have here from a race point of view. So that's also an interesting nuance too, but that's kind of my story in terms of folks that I connected to inspire me.
Yeah, thank you for that.
Sure.
Yeah, Warren, anything you'd like to add to that?
When I look at my background, I was very fortunate in that going into Marriott and working for Dick Marriott, who was the younger brother but larger shareholder, and Bill Marriott, those were two great mentors. And I spent a lot of time with them understanding the dynamics of running, at that time, a family business. Later, I had Steve Reineman also, who ended up as chairman and CEO of PepsiCo, mentored me through Marriott and is still a great friend and mentor to this day. But from an entrepreneurial perspective, John Johnson and Reginald Lewis. Now, John Johnson, I never met or I've never shaken his hand, but I've studied everything I could about him, and I've listened to him and heard him speak a number of times, and he was quite an inspiration. Reginald Lewis, as you know, who started the businesses in the 80s and did leverage buyouts. I went to his office when I was trying to start my company, sat there all day long trying to raise $2 million from him. He took my plan, called me up and said, look, I'll give you the $2 million for 85% of the company. I said, no, thanks, but no thanks. And, but we remained friends, and he was quite a guy. I think when I started my company, though, I had a group of African-Americans who joined my advisory board at no cost. People like Dr. Dorothy Height, Mayor Dinkins, Franco Harris, Martin King. All of those joined my advisory board because they wanted to make sure this young Black company starting in 1992 could be successful, because our mission was to make a difference, especially as it related to historical Black colleges and universities. So they paid it forward so that I could get started and create a company. And now I feel that I owe it to them and others to continue to pay it forward.
So let's switch gears and peel this back a little bit more. So now we got a glimpse into what got you here and who you've been talking to, how you build your network. So I want to get a little bit more understanding around so let us know a little bit about what you do. What's your leadership role? And what's your typical day like? And Warren, if you want to continue and take us in that.
Yeah, I think, I often say that there's a style of leadership that I would consider evolutionary leadership. A leader today, to be successful, has to be able to evolve. You have to be able to understand where the business, where the industries are headed, and skate to where the puck is going as opposed to where it is today. My role in this company is to always try to anticipate where are we going to be 3 years from now. It's too late for me to think about where am I going to be next quarter or next year. If we're not thinking 3 years down the road, that's really what a leader has to do. And I think there's some people on this call from my company, and I think they would attest to the fact that when the pandemic struck in March, we were already preparing for a downturn in the economy. Little did we know it was going to be so drastic, but we were headed in the right direction. Things that we started to do 3 to 5 years ago, scaling down the average size of the restaurant, diversifying our streams of income, going to a stronger cash position. All of those things, if I had waited and if I had tried to react in March to what hit us, we would be under today. So I always say a leader's role is to understand and try to anticipate what's coming down and what's coming down the road. My typical day, there is no typical day. You know, every day is a different. In this industry, you never know when the phone rings or when someone walks into my office. The only thing I know is it's not to tell me I'm doing a good job. Haven't had one of those walk in yet, but usually it's a problem. Usually it's a challenge. Usually it's something we have to deal with or address. And so that's the exciting part of the job. And when you're in industries that are changing so rapidly as ours are, hotels will be totally different going forward from what they were a year ago, as will restaurants, as will contract food service, as will facilities management. So never a dull day.
Yeah.
You know, I agree with Warren 100%. Never a dull day. And obviously, our first rule at NABIT is to make sure we have more Crystals and more Warren. But since the pandemic, it has been Zoom calls, meeting with congressional members by phone, meeting with senators, trying to figure out how we keep our members surviving during this tough time. And it is a tough time, and we hope it gets better soon. But for us, what is the critical element? You spend all day searching for money, people that can invest, looking for facilities. You spend a lot of time trying to determine what can we do more that we haven't done. Talking to industry leaders, creating partnerships. And I'm sure we'll talk a little bit about this. Warren and I are working on some interesting programs to, as he said, to pay off the dividends that people helped us to get where we are, where we want to have more Crystals. We want to support more individuals going to school, so that leadership in that pipeline. You know, something Warren Fields told me at Pyramid when we had an issue in Cincinnati, that they didn't have Black executives in a hotel. And Warren Fields said to me, we've got to create a pipeline. And so for us at NABIT, we're always building that pipeline. We're always building that relationship. We're always building how to anticipate, as Warren Thompson said, going forward. 3 years from now, will we have more people in the lifestyle brand? I mean, think about it, where Crystal is. That's an unusual position. She's probably one of the very few persons of color that occupy that position. And really, that's a critical position in the hospitality industry. So our day is real simple. I never know what's going to happen. I anticipate one thing, and that's picking up the phone and saying hello, or Andy Ingram. And the conversation goes from morning, and we live in many different time zones. I believe, Crystal, you're in LA?
I'm in LA, yep.
Yeah, so Warren and I are both in Fort Lauderdale. Weather's great, by the way. But we talk to people all over the U.S., sometimes all over the world. We spent yesterday trying to help a individual in Anguilla get a loan from a group in Chicago. So typically we want to grow the model that we have at NABIT, so we have more owners, more vendors, and more executives.
So got a question from the audience that I think may be relevant to what we're talking about here. Is a question from a chef that wants to know, what ideas do each of you have in building equity for the BIPOC community, Black, Indigenous, people of color? So the question is, what ideas do each of you have in building equity for the BIPOC community?
Equity in what? I guess would be my question to answer that. Do we mean across the industry and specific roles, or are we talking about ownership?
Well, you know, then we do have a question about ownership.
All of it, yeah.
Let's just say across the industry, yeah.
Yeah, I mean, I can take that a little bit. I tell young people, the first thing you have to do is start building your balance sheet. A person should look at their own personal financials just as you'd look at a company's balance sheet. Try to get a real estate, a piece of asset on that balance sheet as quickly as possible, whether it's a condo, a house, a trailer, or something. Buy something that you can live in. and start to build that net worth. It'll bode well if you can do that as early as you can out of college. And then start to really manage your household as a business. Your income is your revenue, your expenses and so forth, so that you're building net worth. And if you're not building net worth by 10 to 15% a year, then think about what you're doing and maybe change what you're doing and do something differently. But it starts very small. I mean, my father gave me a $5,000 loan when I bought my first house, okay? And that was a lot of money then for me. You know, it wasn't what Donald Trump got, but that $5,000 loan, I still have that check. And that's the most important thing in my life to save and preserve, because it reminds me from where I came.
Yeah.
Warren, just adding to that, will that also will show a potential investor your commitment in what you're attempting to do?
Right.
People find that you're committed, they will more readily get on board, help you realize that dream. You know, and I don't want to talk out of turn, but Warren and I have a lot of these discussions, as I do with many of my board members and many of our members. And the discussion is always how we can help the next generation. And so we've got to make decisions based on whether it's somebody with a personal relationship, somebody we meet, an idea, just as Marriott saw when Warren left them to start his business, have known something back then to put Warren where he is today. And so it's real simple. And if you can talk to Crystal, I'm sure she'll give you the same advice. I want to help, but I want to help somebody that really is committed to what they say they are or what they're doing. And that commitment is easily identified because you can see the steps that they're taking. And that's important for young people getting into this business.
Yeah, I think the way I would answer that question is the first step is access, right? Like, you know, that exists across industries. You know, when we talk about equity, the first thing is like getting knowledge about what's even there. I mean, I'm refinancing my condo and there's so many elements of that I didn't know about, but I called, you know, White Uncle Bruce, who connected me to Cousin Hal, who then connected me to his mortgage person who knows all the things. And these are, I know that's a bit colloquial, but really the access to what the majority often have and things that start very early on about, you know, Warren, you talk about buying a home out of college. Some folks I know that I went to school with, they had a home bought for them when they were born. And so, you know, getting the same amount of access is really the first step, or at least knowing the questions to ask. I didn't even know the questions to ask on a lot of the processes that I've undergone, both financially and professionally. But again, that idea of being a sponge was really important to me, opening the doors to getting the access to those things. So it really is a layered process, I think, of trying to get equity for ourselves is one thing, but we need help and we got to ask the right questions and get access to the rooms. And, you know, Andy, I appreciate your words about my role, because I am kind of a unicorn in some ways, and being at this level, being in the rooms that I'm in, looking how I do, talking the way I do, and having access to those things. And Victor, you know, I called you like, what can I do with this access? Who can I give it to? You know, how can, you know, Rise Up, Reach Back is one of those things, one of the themes of AdColor, which is another organization for people of color in advertising. And so there's a lot that needs to be done, I think, on both sides.
Yeah, Victor, I'll just add to that. I mean, what you do at Cornell and your forward thinking is so critical to Crystal's point of being exposed. I remember hopping in a cab in New York City with Evans Charles, and we were at a state conference, and calling you and said, hey, listen, how can we get more people of color in real estate? And your idea was, hey, let's do something, focus on that. And so Crystal is right. We're starting at a disadvantage, but any great athlete knows that when that gun goes off, you've got to run as quickly, as fast as you can to the finish line. And for us, exposure, networking, what you do at Cornell and many of the hospitality schools that do a great job at taking us and bringing us in and say, gee, we can do that. We can be this. And so for us, the process begins through the educational opportunities that folks like you do at all these schools, and we're so grateful for that.
Well, thank you for that, Andy. Thank you. I appreciate that. Let me ask this question, Crystal. So thinking about this hospitality industry and your career journey, what do you see are some of the characteristics and traits that have defined your success and where you are, being this unicorn, which we're hoping that will not be a label that we'll have to carry for a long period of time. But for now, it is. So
I'm one of one, Victor. So no, that's a great question. I think for me, it's always come down to, I'll tell you what comes out in every review that's been done on me throughout my career, 360 from my managers, from my peers. It's always been two things. One, Crystal is who she is at all times in all rooms. And so authenticity is just a big part of me. I don't know how to be anything different. We talk about the ability to flex, which I certainly can flex it, but at the core, the way you see me on this Zoom is the way I am on Hyatt calls, and it's the way I am maybe a little more fluidly with my homegirls, but I am the same in all rooms. And I think that's a big drawing point, to what Andy was just saying. You want to know that people are real and are invested in their own success. And I think that's been a big piece for me. The second thing that comes out is just the willingness to learn and listen. Right? Like I might have a strong point of view. In fact, I often have a strong point of view, but when I don't, I'm always amenable to being challenged and to hearing a different point of view that might push us to another output. And so, those things have been really key for me, I think, as I've grown in this industry and outside of the industry when I was at Apple. Just being able to, again, be a sponge and connect to leadership in a different way, but also being myself along the way.
Yeah, no, that's awesome. Go ahead. Yeah, I think that's an awesome perspective, Crystal. One of the things I often tell our students is authenticity is the key. And when you're going for that interview and you're having that conversation, they need to see that who you are, because at the end of the day, your identity is what they need the most. Because that's as we talk about, innovation in the marketplace is all about diversity of ideas and of thoughts and positions of what we bring to the table. So I'm always encouraging our students to be authentic, really represent yourself in a way, as much as Crystal is identifying. You don't have to fake it, because at the end of the day, if you do have to fake it, that's perhaps not the best move for you anyway.
That's exactly what I was going to say, but you said it.
Well, but that's just how we work. But it's but it's a real thing for many of our students, and in particular where we are in our industry today. And which then I want to pivot to a question that is coming from the audience. So Diego wants to know, any thoughts on an MBA program versus work experience with current state of the union in the hospitality sector? So I think they're asking about, do I go get that MBA while this thing is tanking, or what position should I take in this idea right now?
Who's paying for the MBA?
That's a good question.
That's a critical element.
That's a real question.
Yeah.
I got an answer for that too, but go ahead. Yes.
No, listen, I think it's an individualistic decision, but you've got to be smart. And Warren said it, you've got to anticipate where we're going to be a couple of years from now coming out of here. And something Crystal said, listen, Crystal is good because on her last job, they recognized that last job was an audition for the next job. And so I tell people this all the time, whether you're going to take an MBA, get the next degree, that is never going to ensure that you're going to go up the corporate ladder. It's going to make you more marketable, but you also need to have that personal experience or that real experience within the industry. So I always tell people, how do you can get the MBA, but in the meantime, you've got some extra time. You should be interning, you should be working part-time, you should be fulfilling that goal that you have experiences on both sides of the fence. And to me, I think there's nothing more critical than having real life experience. I mean, I'm reminded of one of my heroes, Hank Thomas. When I get a chance to talk to Hank Thomas very often, he's in Georgia, but as an 18-year-old guy at Howard University, he decided to become a freedom rider and to be hit upside the head because he wanted to make a difference. Hank, why? And he said he had a vision. He spent some time in school. He spent some time riding on the bus through the South. At the end of the day, he became very successful because of that preparation, that commitment, and that vision that he had. Tough. It couldn't be any more tougher then. And for us today, it's much easier because we've got people that are really committed to success and not really committed to beating us across the head. Hope that made sense.
Yeah, just on the MBA piece, you know, I'm the son of two educators, so obviously I would opt and say more education is better than less. But it's not so much the degree itself, but it's everything that comes along with an MBA. You know, if you think about getting ahead later in life in particular, a lot of it depends on who you know. Well, when you go to 4 years of undergrad, you get to know people, you make connections. But then when you go to that MBA program, it takes it to the next level. And there's a high probability some of the people you sat next to in that MBA program 20 years down the road will be in the C-suite of some corporation. So my MBA not only paid dividends in terms of opening doors upon graduation, but now it opens doors when I want to do business with a certain company. The first thing I do is, well, who went to my grad school that I can call on? Or if you look at the number of African Americans on public boards, I guarantee you there's a higher percentage of African Americans who have MBAs who sit on corporate boards than any other race. We always have to be better, more educated to get the same opportunity. So that's,
I work twice as hard to get half as far.
There you
My
go.
mama told me.
Said it better. That's exactly what I was trying to say.
You know, I want to unpack this because we want to unpack this conversation around ownership because that's a component that I think we all are trying to push. So let me ask the question. So please describe the progress that the hospitality industry needs to take or is taking to provide an opportunity for ownership, development, and senior leadership for minorities.
Yeah, I mean, there's ways to go. If I can kick that, Andy.
Please, go ahead, Crystal.
I'll just kick that. I think there's ways to go. You know, I work at Hyatt, and so, you know, being here during all the things last summer and otherwise, I had an opportunity, particularly at the level that I'm at, to have a real impact on the commitments that we made as an organization to move us forward in a lot of different ways to get that equity that someone asked about, but also the progress that we need. We've already, over the last 30 minutes, we talked about how few examples there are of people like me in the role that I'm in, and we got ways to go to make that better. And so for us, we know we got to fix our own house first before we can go out and say we're doing all these things. And so at Hyatt specifically, we're looking at our representation both in the corporate level and in the field. So we want to double the amount of Black GMs and even women GMs and people of color over the next year. We want to commit to our local community, specifically in Chicago, where we're based, to ensure that we're giving back to those local Black businesses and creating equity within our communities that we're part of. And even more than that, we want to start partnering with wider organizations to provide that education and access to what could be within our industry. On our pre-call, we were talking about just really the lack of knowledge sometimes on the breadth of hospitality examples. And so the idea of owning a hotel, but also being a brand leader for one, is not something that comes up often in our communities. It's often relegated to service roles. And, you know, Andy mentioned it, that it's very bottom heavy, and we got to change the perception of that. So I think there's a lot of progress to be made, and it's starting with the changing of the perception, educating, and providing more access to our folks.
You know, I think if you look at the hotel industry, in the 60s, 50s and 60s, Blacks couldn't stay in a hotel. Then the economic picture changed, and everybody wanted to get as many customers as quickly as possible. So Blacks were allowed to stay in hotels because it was good for business. Then it got to the point where Blacks could stay in a hotel, but you couldn't own one. But now fast forward to where we are today, given the industry, the hotel companies will franchise to anybody who can put together the capital deal, right? So now we have to figure out, well, how do we get to the capital? Because if we get to the capital, the other part is easy. Okay, no one's going to say to you, I'm not going to sell you this hotel because you're Black. They can be the most racist person in the world, but if you've got the money, they'll sell it to you. So,
green is a good color.
so now we have to focus not so much on saying, you know, we can't break into the industry. We have to focus on how do we get the capital. It's all about how we get access to the capital through creative ways, through offshore opportunities. How do we get money in our hands to take advantage of what now, too, is going to be a real opportunity over the next 3 years? There are going to be a lot of hotels changing hands in the next 3 years. Are we in a position to take advantage of that?
Warren, you hit it right on the head. Number one issue that's facing us is access to capital. The critical element that we do at NABHOOD is create that network where 4, 3, 2, 10 of us come together, we get to meet, and I like to sometimes talk about Evans Charles. At his first meeting at NABHOOD, he wanted to be in the business. When he left NABHOOD, he had all 3 of his additional partners. One guy, he had gone to school. They both went to Temple University, but they've never met. To Warren's point about that network that you begin to build. And so for us, the critical access is, yes, we're going to get into business. We need capital, but to some degree, a lot of hotels like Hyatt, we've done workshops at Hyatt, Hilton, Marriott, a lot of them have made a commitment to help us. The other big critical element is public-private partnerships. It is, when you look around the country, there's a lot of opportunities to partner with cities that can put capital into deals. But to Crystal's point, we've got to understand how to craft those deals. And so when you think about the 58,000 hotels, more than 58,000 hotels in this country, 44% of them are owned by Asian Americans. African Americans as a group own just over 1,000 hotels around the country. And to Warren's point, many years ago, Blacks couldn't stay in some of the major hotels in major cities. They were relegated to going into the neighborhood and staying at the Josephine Dunn, the John Smith Hotel or the Hill Hotel in Fort Lauderdale. But think about how the market is changing. So, for example, a recent study put out, African Americans spend $109.4 billion annually on travel. Just imagine if they decided to withhold that money and say, we're only going to go to this hotel or that hotel. The whole market changes. And therefore, if they're looking for Black-owned hotels, you'll find that there's an effort put on to create more Black-owned hotels. But that's reactionary. What we're doing today is to figuring out real quickly how we raise capital, whether it's going offshore, whether it's high net worth individuals, whether it's funds. I mean, we've got a fund now. Don Peoples is raising a fund of $500 million. Raul Thomas and A-Rod just put a fund together of $650 million, and they're partnering to some degree with Hilton Hotels, which made that possible. So yes, number one issue in any business, particularly one that's capital intensive as the hotel business, is going to be access to capital. And that's something we spend every day trying to figure out, as Warren does. How do we get access to capital to either get into business, grow our business, buy new businesses? And that's really a struggle every day.
So that kind of helps us pivot into maybe this last series of questions, or last portion of questions that I want to ask. That we're going to set the tone for thinking about the next generation. How do we position them for success in the industry? And that's one part of the question. And the other part is what are some of the things that we know there are things that are working well now? So how do we build on these successes that are currently exist in the marketplace that we can continue to grow and make sure people have access to? So I'd like you to talk a little bit about our students, what should they prepare themselves for this industry? And then we'll talk a little bit about, how we should transition that for the successes that we have and how we build on that. And Crystal, if you could start that, I appreciate it.
Yeah, sure. I think, when we talk about what was the first part of the question? Like, what does it take to be successful, or what should they be thinking of?
Yeah, what should our students be thinking of in terms of success as they think about their career in the next move?
Yeah, and I think it goes back to knowing what you want to do. And if you don't, ask the right questions, or ask questions, and be yourself. Like that has worked for me, at least. And it's worked for a lot of my colleagues friends who are leaders in their respective organizations. And I think within hospitality specifically, I am personally passionate about staying a few steps ahead of things creatively, but also keeping up with the culture. We haven't talked about COVID once on this call, which is fair, but, thinking about our existing landscape, where we are and how that's going to change us for the future, how that might have even brought out even more inequities amongst our communities, and how we need to probably catch up even more so after this. Being mindful of those things and feeling empowered to continue trekking the trek. And for me, a lot of what I see, look at how much we've done in culture. Look at, y'all had a good time at the beginning of COVID because of Black folks on TikTok, on Instagram, on social media, and we can't take away from what's relevant today. And so when I think about your students, just to wrap it back around, like, lean into what you're passionate about and see how you can incorporate that into your everyday. Everything that I do, every partnership that I consider making, I'm thinking about, do I care about this? What partners do I like? What leaders do I like? Who's moving and shaking in the industry that I want to partner with, that is resonating with the wider community and within culture. So I think take part of who you are and try to incorporate it into your work, and that can keep you relevant and keep you on track to grow.
Yeah, I'll jump in as well. I think, when I look at where students are today and the decisions they have to make about their futures, first is there's the adage of know thyself, and to thyself be true. Understand, everybody is not cut out to be an entrepreneur. Everybody's not cut out to be a corporate executive. So understand which path works better for you and really pursue that path. And if you decide to be a corporate executive, that's great. We need corporate executives in corporate America. But companies have different cultures. There are some that are more entrepreneurial. There are some that say, basically, we've got everything in place. We need somebody who's going to come in and follow the plan. Our company as an example, I look at our company as very entrepreneurial. People who join our company join because they want to make good money, but they have to take some risks to do that. They have to take some ownership. I'll do a commercial here. Our head of HR is on this call, Edie Freeman. So if anybody's interested in our company, please contact Edie. But I think people who join our company may be somewhere suspended between wanting to be a corporate executive and wanting to be an entrepreneur. But then those who want to follow the entrepreneurial path you've got to be willing to take risk. You know, Andy mentioned earlier, you've got to be able to be all in. You can't be a person who says, well, I'm going to work during the day and I'm going to do the entrepreneurial thing at night. It's not going to work. If you're going to do that, then be all in, be willing to take the risk, be willing to put it all on the line, because every successful entrepreneur that you look at, whether it's John Johnson, Reginald Lewis, Bob Johnson, they all were willing to put it on the line, but they were also all smarter than the average entrepreneur in their generation. We hear about SPACs today. Well, Bob Johnson did a SPAC 10 years ago. You know, he took his hotels public through a SPAC. So everybody's talking about SPACs today, and I just got on board with the SPAC. I'm late to the game, but Bob did it 10 years ago, okay? So I challenge young people, be the Bob Johnson, be the Reginald Lewis, be the John Johnson of your generation. And that means getting to the place where the puck is going before it gets there.
Wow. Wow,
Yeah.
thank you.
Let me just add to it. I know we're running out of time. Preparation, and be prepared to take risks. I know we're running out of time, Victor, so.
Right.
Any last word, Crystal, you want to drop?
BU, shout out to Cornell, shout out to SIBA, Cornellish. But thanks for the opportunity. And really, I'm here if any students want to chat. I love it.
Awesome. Thank you guys so much for taking the time to have this conversation. I know there's a lot more we could unpack, but for the time we were here, we are walking away with more information than we started. So thank you so much for that. So with that said, thank you everyone for just checking in and being a part of the conversation, and we'll see you on the next eCornell platform.
Very cool. Thanks, everybody.
Bye.